Good afternoon, evening to everyone, and welcome to our presentation, Master Your Resume Skills to Get Noticed. My name is Lucy Curran Elliott, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president of Prospanica's Washington, D.C. chapter, as well as being part of the Latina Track Entre Amigas committee. I'm so excited to welcome you to today's session, Master Your Resume Skills to Get Noticed. Today's goal is simple: to help you strengthen and refine your resume in preparation for our upcoming national conference. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. If you haven't already heard the exciting news, this year's Prospanica National Conference is going fully virtual. This means you can tune in from anywhere in the country and still be fully immersed in all the incredible content, connections, and career opportunities that the conference has to offer. And the best part is that this year's conference is completely free. So if you haven't registered yet, I encourage you to do so today. You'll be joining a vibrant, inspiring community and gaining access to sessions that can truly elevate your professional journey. In today's webinar, we'll be diving into the do's and don'ts of resume building and sharing practical tips to help your resume stand out in the competitive job market, especially with the national conference just around the corner. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Liz Arnold. Liz is the founder and CEO of Digital Orchards, where she helps professionals land roles in tech, startups, and social impact. With 20 plus years of experience, she's coached thousands through career transitions and held leadership roles at Google, MIT, Cornell, and Harvard. Liz currently teaches at Syracuse University's Maxwell School and holds degrees from Princeton, the University of Arizona, and the University of Geneva. I'm excited to hear all of the practical insights Liz will be sharing with us today. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Liz.
Great, thank you. And welcome to everyone on the live stream. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Over the next 40 minutes, I'm planning to share the exact strategies that have helped my students and clients land offers at top companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, TikTok, and more. And so what we're going to cover tonight is how to beat the ATS bots, how to leverage AI the right way, how to quantify your achievements using Google's XYZ formula, and optimizing your resume for MBA recruiting. So how to get the most out of this session is to drop your comments into the chat. And when I finish the presentation, we will make sure to answer as many questions as we can. So also, what I'd love to hear is, where are you in your MBA journey? So if you could also drop that into the chat. Are you a first-year MBA, a second year, an executive MBA, recent grad, or career changer? Awesome. So starting to see some comments. So while we're waiting for everyone to get engaged, let's dive in. So most of you are probably struggling with one of these challenges: fitting everything onto one page, not getting interviews, describing your achievements, not understanding what recruiters want, and navigating ATS systems, keywords, AI. And you're probably nodding at home. So if you are, we're going to try to cover as many of the answers to all of these questions as you can. So let's start with some of the resume fundamentals that most people get wrong or just aren't aware of. So we're first going to talk about, what is your resume actually supposed to do? And this might surprise you, but your resume has only one job. That is to get you an interview. Next slide, please. So that's it, full stop. As you can see, it is not to tell your life story. It's not to show everything you've ever done. Recruiters spend 6 to 8 seconds scanning your resume. The ATSs, the AIs spend even less. Your job is to make it easy for a recruiter. They should scan it, have no questions, and move you forward in the process. So here's the test. Can someone tell what you want to do just by scanning your resume? I've actually developed this skill, and I've gotten pretty good at figuring out what people want to do without them actually telling me, just based on how they wrote their resume. And I think this is especially critical as many companies, particularly in tech, but some others have let go of career cover letters. That usually means that your resume has to speak for itself. When I was at Cornell Johnson as the tech advisor, the Microsoft recruiter used to say that she could tell whether the resumes came from Cornell simply because of how ruthless I had been with forcing them to tell stories and capture their skills and their accomplishments. It just made her job so much easier to see who was a fit for the role and who wasn't very quickly. And this is a good thing because you don't want a recruiter to spend a ton of time on your resume. You want them to see your profile, make a quick decision, and move you into the positive pile. So let's go over just the quick sections of the resume just to make sure that you have all of them. So the first one is education. You want to make sure that you have this at the top because that tells a recruiter that you're a current student. If you're someone who is a recent alum or someone who is more experienced, you'll move education down and put experience on top. But if you are a current student, education should be at the top. The other thing that you should do is make sure that you are including any specializations, whether you have are in a club, whether you're an officer in a club, or what your relevant coursework is. So that again starts to help someone understand the story you're trying to tell with your resume. So for example, if you had that you were part of the technology club and the consulting club, that to me says you're someone interested in strategy and operations, or maybe product management, or that you're someone who is indecisive because you have two kind of very different professional clubs. So I want to read a little further to understand which one this is. Then maybe I see some coursework in data analysis, product development, entrepreneurship. I start going, this person might want product management. And now I'm starting to see the story that you're trying to tell me in your resume. The next section that we have is experience. Your experience section tells me, where have you worked in the past, right? Usually prior to business school. This is also the section for any of you who are second years where you will include your internship experience. So this is kind of considered your formal set of experience. Now, the italicized portion right next to your company name helps the recruiter understand what kind of organization you worked at before. Maybe you were at a large nonprofit and now you describe that it is a nonprofit with a budget of, I don't know, $2 million with a staff of 20. Don't worry, we're going to come back to the XYZ bullets in a minute. But part of the reason that you're adding this description is it helps me as a recruiter understand the size and scope of the work that you did at a particular organization if I've never heard of that organization before. So the last part here and thinking about sections, we're going to come back to projects and skills, but overall, the reason that you want to have multiple of these smaller sections is it again helps you tell your story. The section headings on the left help you customize your version of your resume, and they serve as signposts for recruiters to really quickly scan your resume and find the info that they need to make that decision to help you get an interview. These actually are also very helpful signposts for any AI bots because they now understand what is the information that's coming after that particular signpost that you've created. Last pro tip, never ever have 1.5 pages of a resume because it looks unfinished and it makes me wonder, did they forget to finish filling it in? It's also not the best use of space. So if you are a current student, you should have a 1 page. If you are someone who has more than 10 years of work experience and your MBA, that's when you can start thinking about having a 2-page resume. And I know for many students, this is a hard thing to hear of how to kind of condense your background into 1 page. So I'm going to give you some more tips on how to do that. So the pro tip for that is think cumulatively about your experience. So for example, if you manage a $25,000 budget at job 1, a $50,000 at job 2, and maybe you got promoted or at another job and you managed 100,000, only list that for job number 3, because what I or recruiters are going to assume is progression. They're going to understand that you either have done this before or you have other skills that got you at that level to be managing a budget of that size. The only exception is when you're trying to show that that progression is strategic for the story that you're trying to tell. Maybe you're looking for a general management role where you're going to have P&L responsibility, and you want to show that you've been managing progressively larger budgets, and you want to really highlight that. Whereas if you simply just want to show that you've managed a large budget at some point, then this condensement of your and consolidation will actually help you save space on your one-page resume. Now, the other secret weapon that many folks are not aware of, but can become really powerful within the next few years, is a comprehensive resume. Some call it a master resume. This, please start this now. It is simply a dumping ground where you can put all of the things that you have worked on. This really does pay dividends later in your career when you get to a certain age where you start to forget what are some of the things that you did, projects that could actually be highly relevant to a particular new job that you are interested in, but you don't remember what you did, what was the accomplishment. So getting this into a good habit of tracking all of this in a comprehensive resume is super helpful. This can be like 50 pages, 10 pages, but the idea is and it can be formatted however you want. It's for you, and it is a place to capture all of these things that you have worked on, and then you use that to kind of pull certain bullets into a more customized version of your resume. And again, this may just be relevant. That marketing project that you worked on 2 years ago might now be relevant because you've decided you want to focus on brand management. And you can highlight, I have already worked on a marketing project, even though I was in a fully different I was in the finance team, but I was partnering with our marketing team to execute some kind of project. So let's move on to the next section. So here we're going to think about ATS optimization and skills. So we're going to talk about the gatekeepers, the bots, because the harsh truth is you need to think about, next slide, please, the ATS reality check. 75% or more resumes just aren't seen by humans. Some of that is because they're badly written, right? Like, this is not to say this is all amazing resumes just never make it. That is part of why there's this applicant tracking system to help weed out the resumes that are just not a good fit. The challenge for you is making sure you are on the other side where you are moving forward in the process. And so this software, ATS or applicant tracking systems, is software that scans for three things, mainly keywords, skills, and formatting. And the good news is you can beat the ATS. You don't have to stress as much if you follow some of these tips. They're just specific tips. So first set of tips, think about formatting. So next slide. So here is the ATS friendly formatting tips. So on the left side, we have things that the ATS hates. It hates tables and text boxes, headers, graphics, some of the stuff that you'll probably seen in any type of generic resume builder template where it's got 2 columns and it's got lots of lines and it's pretty. Those were optimized for when people were looking at them. And they actually are really hard for an ATS system to process. So it ends up making your resume look super weird, or it just kicks it out because it can't process all the actual words that it wants to see. So do not do the stuff on the left. On the right, and I know that this may make it more boring to look at, but your goal is to get an interview, not to have an amazingly beautiful resume. So what you want to do is the stuff on the right. You want to have standard section headers, experience, education, skills, all the examples that I showed you before. You want to use simple fonts, so Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman. You want to have standard bullet points, so not the little stars or the check boxes or other, just standard bullets, and a clean single column layout. So you saw the example I had before was just this one list of all your experiences and accomplishments. And the last thing is either a .docx, Microsoft Word, or a PDF format. I personally think PDF is the best, and you should try to use that whenever possible, because then it actually looks like the resume you want. DocX, but definitely check the job description just to make sure how they want you to submit. Because that is also a way for me to screen you out if you cannot follow directions that are listed in a job description. And so the goal here is get through the ATS and then impress the humans when you're actually in the interview process. So we talked about formatting. Now let's talk about the keyword strategy. So I'm going to say something crazy. Read the job description. Don't just submit it to an AI. Don't just scan it. I want you to actually read a few of them. You don't have to do it for every single job, but the next few, you're going to want to go through and look for what are required skills and qualifications. What are tools, software, any of those kind of things that they call out as a requirement of knowing some sort of software? What is the industry terminology that that company uses? Maybe it's also that they use client versus customer. So, different organizations use different terminology for similar things, and you want to use the words that they use on your resume. And that's an easy, quick, control find to just replace all of those when you're sending to a particular organization. Oh, and also action verbs. So the way they describe how you do work, use those in your resume. And if it's easy to kind of swap certain things out. And because what you want to do is mirror that language in your resume. So don't keyword stuff. Don't just try to dump a bunch of them in there because you're hoping the ATS will see it. You want to make it natural. And other pro tip is include both acronyms and spelled out versions. So for example, SQL is a tool that you might use for data analysis. You could also write out structured query language. That particular one, it may not be as necessary, but sometimes it's helpful to know, like, you checked both boxes. So if you have the space on your resume, think about when you can write out some type of word like NPS and Net Promoter Score. Like, having both of those increases your chances that the ATS will recognize that term. So those were two. And now the third is skills. Skills are keywords too. So your skills section is also prime real estate for ATS optimization and human scanning. It's helping both of them. And focus on hard skills. So you want certifications, you want data analysis tools, foreign languages, programming languages, tools that are clearly easy to articulate. You probably don't want to use things like team player because that's not really a hard skill. Whereas under the bucket of leadership management, you could put strategic planning, you could put team leadership, which is a different thing than just being a team player. Budget management. Listed some here of some of the tools. You could list Excel, or you could also list Excel modeling, like the usage of the tool, or financial modeling. Languages, it's assumed that you probably speak English. However, if you want to highlight as someone who that wasn't your first language, and you really want to highlight that you are fluent in multiple languages, then that would be something to highlight. And lastly is an example of PMP, which is Project Management Professional. So that's, again, the acronym and the full list. The other thing that comes from this is also, as you're looking at these skills in the job descriptions, if you don't have the skill, you could be building a list of skills you need to go get. And so that can be something you could work with your school, with friends. You can look at many online tools to help build that skill so that it can go back onto your resume at some point in the future. So my bet is many of you are looking at your resumes right now. So, if you have it up, what is one skill that you see that's not on there? Feel free to throw that into the comments just so we can kind of see what are some of the skills that people are realizing, wow, I didn't realize that was a skill that I should make sure I called out on my resume. And so, great. Okay, now we're going to move on to what is the XYZ formula. I would say this is probably the most valuable 10 minutes of this whole presentation. This is the framework to me that separates good resumes from great resumes. And it's called the XYZ formula, and it comes from some of my colleagues at Google. So you didn't think you were going to have to do math or formulas while you're in a resume workshop, but I promise it's not that hard. Um, so the formula is accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z. And I'm going to give you plenty of examples. But when you break it down, X equals what did you achieve? What is the result of the work that you did somewhere? Y is how did you measure that result? What was the metric that you used? And Z is how you did it. Like, what is the method or the approach that you took? And I promise using this formula feels a little uncomfortable at first for some folks, but once you start doing it, it really helps your experiences and your accomplishments just sound even more impressive than they already are. And so it helps you show impact in your role, not just job responsibility. So let us go through a couple examples. So the first one is example one is around a social media role. So it's a simple example to help show you. If you came in and told me, great, I managed social media accounts, I would say that's not helpful for me to understand what you did. It's just a simple task. There's not a result, there's not measurement, and I just don't know how well you did. So, here is a much expanded version of that. So you increased Instagram engagement by 145% over 6 months by implementing a data-driven content calendar and an influencer partnership strategy. As you can see, the X is that you increased engagement. You increased engagement of a particular tool, Instagram, not just any social media. Y, you did that you had 140%, 5% increase over a particular period of time. And then how did you do it? You used a data-driven content, you developed that content calendar, and you developed influencer partnerships. So this is a much more expanded version that helped me understand what did it mean to manage social media accounts. Okay, next slide. So for this example, it's oh, I think you skipped way ahead. You're almost at the end. So back to slide, I think 19 or something. It's okay. So oh, there we go. Right there. Example one. So next slide to example two. Perfect. So example two is team leadership. So this one, before you led a team project. Again, this is something you're going to do in business school. So this tells me nothing, however. What kind of project was it? What was the outcome? Who did you work with? An updated version is delivered 2.3 cost reduction, a 2.3 million cost reduction, 15% under budget by leading cross-functional team of 8 to streamline supply chain operations. I know that was a bit different than an MBA project, but however, in this particular example, you could see the difference, right? Of the result you delivered was this cost reduction, and you did it under budget. You saved a specific amount of money, and then you did it by leading a team of 8, and you streamlined supply chain operations. So you kind of did two parts. So what we're trying to figure out here is, as a project leader, did you save the company time and or money? Did you increase productivity? So again, these are two very different versions of the same concept. And so let's look at example number 3. So for example number 3, we're talking about customer service. I have seen this many times, and I wish people would never use the phrase responsible for. But many people have been responsible for customer service. It really just means I showed up, which is not actually helpful for me to understand as a recruiter. What is the impact that you actually had in that role? So an updated version could say you improved customer satisfaction scores from a 3.2 out of 5 to a 4.7 out of 5, which is a 47% increase. And you did it by redesigning the onboarding process for new clients and new customers. And you also implemented a weekly feedback loop with your team so that everyone knew what was happening with a particular customer. It clearly shows that you improve satisfaction, you had that great result. You did it by measuring kind of that change, showing that before and after can be really powerful for someone. And then Z, you redesign the onboarding and feedback loops. So hopefully you're seeing the pattern and seeing that every bullet should be telling a story of impact. I know sometimes it is hard because the next question that I hear all the time is, but I don't have numbers. I didn't think about this. And that was 2 years ago. What do I do? It's okay. There are ways to address that. So here are a bunch of examples to help you add quantification to your bullets. So if you don't have revenue, if you didn't write down all of it, you probably have some memory of, did you reduce time for how maybe a project was supposed to be a 4 hour or 3 day project, and you actually helped figure out how to make it a 4 hour project. Maybe you want to show scope. So you talk about how you manage this team of 12 across 3 departments, or a team of 2 across, who are located in 2 different sides of the country, right? Like, you're giving me more information as the reader of your resume to understand and put in context the accomplishments that you have. You oversaw a 50K event budget. You expanded a program, right? Like, all of these highlight movement. They all show that something happened as a result of you being in that particular role. So now let me give you a couple or some more examples that are specific to MBA kind of things. So when you're in school, an MBA specific quantification, you're all going to do class projects. As we said, team size. Maybe you're highlighting that you led a team of 5. Maybe the project scope, you did a $10 million company valuation for a client project. Maybe there were grade outcomes. It's fine if you want to put your grades. Some people, it's really, they more want to highlight that they were in the top percentage of class because that's what your school does. They don't actually do specific grades. You might also talk about client satisfaction. Was the client that you worked on with that project really happy? And maybe they gave a qualitative statement. You could say, like, client said we were most outstanding presentation of all, MBAs they'd worked with. Like, those things matter to the people that you're reading. There's case competitions. You can talk about the placement, companies. What was the recommendation? Maybe that case that you put together, they implemented it. That's a pretty cool thing to talk about. The next set of examples talk about club leadership roles. So how many people are in your club? What kind of events did you organize, right? Like, planning 12 networking events that had 50 people join is a great accomplishment because it highlights you put together small, intimate discussion groups. Maybe you planned 12 networking events and one of them had 1,000 people because your goal was to have a huge amount of people. All of this helps me understand and, again, put your things into context. And then internships, again, focusing on this scope and speed of the project. So I know you're probably looking at your resume right now. So feel free, if you want to put into the comments, XYZ, if this formula has helped change how you think about doing your resume. Because I have found over the years that every time I explain this, people are like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And why did no one tell me this before? So I'm excited to see that there's some more of those coming in the comments, because I do think this is an incredibly helpful tool. So the other keyword that folks are probably waiting for is AI. So we're going to talk about this very briefly, because there's a lot of people who use AI for working on resumes, and some are doing it well, and some could use some improvement. So ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, these tools can absolutely help you with your resume. But here's what I really want you to think about. So next slide. AI is your resume assistant. It is not your resume writer. And the reason I say this is I want, this does not help you in telling your story, because AI can be so generic. So here are some prompts that can actually help you with thinking about how to help generate new ideas to help you write your resume. So the first one is thinking about rewriting bullets. You can now take that XYZ formula, give it to, Claude, or pick your AI tool and say, here is this XYZ formula. It helps quantify achievement. help me rewrite this bullet on my resume to be more achievement focused, and then paste your bullet in. What will either happen is it'll give you something that you're like, oh, I really like that. Or you'll say, well, it's not actually listing. Oh, that's because I didn't tell it some of the accomplishments that I have. Okay, now I need to add some more context. And maybe you go back and forth, and then there's something that comes out of that you're like, okay, I'm happy with that. Or at least this has given me ideas of where to go because I was stuck. For quantification, help me quantify. Maybe you led this marketing, team project for your marketing class, and you're like, I just I'm tired. I've been working on projects all week. I just need some help to think about ways to quantify this. And it might give you some examples of how many people were on the project, what kind of things did you do, what were, was it a NPS score type project, like any of these things. And that might, again, jog your brain enough to go, aha, I know what to do next. Identifying transferable skills. So I've definitely had both clients and students who come in with maybe less traditional paths into kind of business roles. So for example, working as a teacher, and they're just like, how is that help? Like, I can't say that I was in the classroom. How is that transferable? And so maybe what this could help with is understanding what are transferable skills. One could be you now have a domain expertise as a teacher of understanding other teachers. So if you become a product manager in ed tech, you could work on products that are built for teachers and really understand what are the better questions to ask or how you want to design that. Maybe it's actually more about parents. And so you're going to work in ed tech. So it's helping you think about those pieces. And maybe it's also project management. Again, you were teaching in a classroom. You had to make sure you were prepared every day. You had lesson plans. You were great, ahead of students. All of those things are transferable skills. And sometimes it's hard to look at your own background. And what the AI can actually help you with is is giving you more ideas to help you translate. And the last one is optimization. So just thinking about how are you optimizing these skills for a particular role at a company. And you can put your skills in and it might say, oh, here's some ways to reword these, or here's some ways, or here's a big gap that if this is the role you want to do, you didn't list this skill. Maybe you can get suggestions of how to go build that skill. Whether it's taking a Coursera class or taking another class in business school to help you really dive into something. But ultimately, these prompts give the AI context and a specific task. And that will also help the output that you're going to get be better as opposed to rewrite my resume. And then it gets very blah that comes out. So there are some pitfalls, though, of using AI. And so I'm going to say this loudly: never, ever copy and paste AI output directly onto your resume. And the reason for that is it's just so generic because it doesn't know your specific results and numbers. Yes, you can feed those in, and maybe that will help modify or improve a bullet. But we also got to be careful of the hallucinations of things. It's also obvious. If you're a recruiter and you've seen hundreds, you can easily start. Like I can tell certain phrasing is not common to most people of a particular age group or a particular, again, I'm not necessarily judging folks on what their syntax looks like, but when you've seen the same kind of syntax over and over, you start to go, okay, that's common, or that's probably an AI generated syntax, not an individual's. Because part of that is it's often really, really wordy. It's like the professor that you've had, again, because now I'm a faculty member, I could say this. There are many faculty members who just talk a lot and are overly wordy, and that's okay. But on your one-page resume, you don't have time for that. You need to be as succinct as possible. And sometimes the AI is trying to impress you by writing big, fancy words that are not as necessary in your resume. And hallucinating, I mentioned this because over the summer, at one point, I was trying to, get some help or advice on updating my own bio. So I uploaded my resume and said, help me think through what are some things I should be highlighting. And the AI actually said that I founded Harvard, which is a really cool thing, except as we all are pretty clear, I did not actually found Harvard. So this is my new favorite example of hallucination because clearly the AI made some leaps and assumptions from my resume. And the last piece is that it lacks your voice. Your resume should sound like you. This goes back to that story, um, because your resume is your foundational piece for the other pieces of your interview process. So when you can get these bullets, you unpack the bullets on your resume to become stories that you then use in your interviews. And if those are written not in your voice, that will then make it harder to translate them into the stories that you need to use in your interviews. So the more you can make this sound like you, the easier it is to help build on that for the future process for interviewing. So, so now that we've covered pitfalls, let's just talk a little bit about tips, the best practices. Um, the right approach to using it, as we've talked about, is you want it to help you generate a draft or get unstuck. You want it to help you do things, but you don't want to rely on it being the full output because you need to add your specific numbers, metrics, results, and you need to edit ruthlessly for your own voice and authenticity. Because it, it is like having spoken to so many people who are job seeking, whether at career fairs, whether being an advisor, whether being a coach, I can tell when people are reading a resume that's not theirs because it doesn't come off as their own story. So make sure that you're thinking of using AI as this inspiration tool to help you think more, not as this like cut and paste automation of like, woohoo, it's done and this will be an amazing output. Um, okay, so we are nearing the home stretch. So I have one more tip that I really want and strategy that I want to share with you, which I'd mentioned at the beginning. And so then you can all start thinking about your questions as well. So, so this specific move is what I call the project section as a secret weapon. Um, because if you're an MBA student, you're many of the MBAs that I know came to school because they're changing careers, they're pivoting. And so they're coming from a role that is very different than the role they want to land in. And the hard part is how do you bridge that? And so to me, the project section is the place where you can highlight your applied learning and your informal experiences that are balance and support your traditional work experience that's in the experience section. And so this can showcase class projects, case studies, the consulting projects we've talked about, whether paid or unpaid, hackathons, personal side projects. If you want to condense, you want to have volunteer work in here. The nice part to me is this very flexible place that can capture, but also make it clear for someone who's reading your resume. So for an example, might be of a personal side project, could be you might be someone who actually likes to do gaming on the side. And you have created like a really, like people follow you on Instagram to see, or YouTube to see what you're doing. And you've built up a really cool following. So when you come to school and you're like, I actually want to switch into brand management, um, and I have this social media background, this is a great place to highlight that. Because if your day job is like an accountant, and I see on your resume, they're brand management, but they were in accounting. How does this make sense? The gamer piece might be the thing that connects me to see, oh, this person is really passionate about this topic. And that might be how they pivoted or started this pivot. And this is visually helping me understand how are you making this pivot that you want to move. And so then the recruiter doesn't have to guess whether you have relevant skills or not. It's right there in front of them. And so the other question to that is, well, where does this project section go? Usually it's at the bottom of your resume, so kind of under or near the skills section. However, I do want to mention if you're pivoting industries, I would think about putting it at the top of your resume. So under education, so like education, projects, experience, because that might be for that person who's the accountant. You For the person who's the accountant, I might not ever get to the gaming part because it's down here at the bottom. So by moving it up to what we call above the fold, like the top half of your resume, you're helping someone see that story of the pivot that you're trying to chart. So just pro tip to kind of think about is where the placement of that section. And now let's go through some examples just so you can kind of see how you might write some of the bullets in there. So here you'll see it's basically a developed go-to-market strategy for a startup. So maybe that MBA project that you worked on, like you were in the consulting practicum. Maybe this is where you put your case competition. Side project you worked on that built a financial forecasting tool for your neighbor. Now you can formalize it and say, here's this thing I worked on, or the consulting pro bono. You'll notice I also put dates by all of them, but they're not formatted in the more formal experience of date, company, title, all of that. It's more, here are things I've worked on. And these then become great things that a recruiter can unpack, or someone in an interview can unpack and say, tell me more about why you worked on this financial forecasting tool. So, and for those of you who might be more experienced hires who are watching this, or more recent alums, this is where that comprehensive resume I mentioned earlier helps, because you can go back to that and say, oh, there's that thing, that marketing project I worked on 3 years ago, and now this is the place I can put it, because it wasn't like a formal thing, but it was a project. And so this is a great place to put that. So, and again, this continues to help you with this charting out your transferable skills and your new capabilities. So now we have covered a ton in the last 40 minutes. So let's bring it all together with a quick recap and set of action items, and then I will hand it back to Lucy for questions. So first thing is resume checklist. Remember, your goal with a resume is to get an interview. It is not to recap your entire life. That's what that comprehensive resume is for. So what you want to make sure you have, clear story. Can someone tell what you want to do? Right length, 1 page for almost all MBAs. ATS friendly format, simple, clean, standard, very easy to read. Keywords from the job description that you are going to go read. You want to then mirror that language in your resume. Strong skills section. Is it categorized, relevant, and update it for each role? Like swap keywords in and out, or skills in and out that could be helpful depending on the job you're applying for. The XYZ formula that we talked about, so that every bullet is showing achievement and impact. A project section, especially if you're pivoting or early career, it's a great place to be highlighting all of that informal experience that you've had. And the last is thinking about quantified achievements. So numbers, metrics, scope. So all those examples I provided earlier. And if you check all of these boxes, you will be ahead of like 90% of people, because most people, you're doing all this work for that 6 seconds of yes, you want that super quick decision to be made. Okay, so now a list of actions, because it's helpful when you have a list that you should be thinking about in the next week or so. So I want you to help commit to doing these 5. 1, try running your resume through an ATS checker. There are tools like JobScan, Resume Worded. Resi is kind of an AI builder, but some of these may give you some ideas or some feedback on what are things and skills that you really should be highlighting. 2, build that comprehensive resume that I talked about. Make sure you're getting everything into one place just so that it's easy for you to find later on. 3, rewrite 5 bullets on your resume. If you're strapped for time and you can't do all of it, just pick 5 bullets that you know are like, yeah, these were some really good things that if I made these pop and I made these really well defined, this will really help my resume. 4, update your skills section. So make sure you're reviewing those target job descriptions and adding 3 to 5 skills that you've been leaving off. And last, create or update a project section. Highlight that really important informal experience or applied learning, because again, that's how you're showing that you're moving and pivoting in your future career. So, and lastly, remember, your resume is a living document. Like you change, you do new things. You don't want to edit it every 5 minutes, because that'll be exhausting, but maybe set something like once a month, or once every quarter, you think about what were some projects that I want to make sure I get into that uh, uh, comprehensive resume. So with that, I will hand it back to Lucy and say thank you very much for joining so far, and I look forward to hearing the questions.
Thank you so much, Liz. This presentation was really fantastic. You had so many different actionable tips. I've got to say that XYZ formula is such a great recommendation. Like, I've listened to many resume presentations, and this is fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've got a few questions that folks have dropped in, and I'll continue to encourage people to, please keep dropping them in the chat, and we'll go through as many as we can. So
Sure.
the first question that we've got is from Orlando Gomez, and he's asking if it's best to do a 2-page resume with the education at the end for more seasoned professionals.
Yes. Usually, so if you are current, like if you are a seasoned professional, yes, I would say 2-page, and you have education towards the end. Probably, I would still put it above skills. But for a seasoned professional that has more than 10 years experience, that's where I could have a whole other thing about you want to have an exec summary on page 1. I would have an exec summary, a key score, core skills section, and then a key accomplishment section, so that you're kind of, again, that above the folds, that first little half, when you have a 2-page resume. And then education can go after your experience section. So yeah, I think I
Perfect.
answered that. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Next question is from Marielle Ali. For the AI as your resume assistant slide, you're talking about rewriting bullets, and should each bullet point include numbers?
Yes. As much quantification as you can, because think of it as some of the example I had earlier was if you planned 12 events, 12 networking events, 12 is helpful because I know that the number of events. But if you add a little bit more to say, and there were 1,000 plus attendees, or with a budget of 50,000, like that gives me a very different sense of whether those were 12 networking events that had 1,000 people at each of them, and it was actually like, $250,000 budget. Like it's showing me size and scope and scale. So any of those numbers help me understand what kind of thing you did and how much time you spent on it. So yes, numbers are very helpful.
Perfect. All right. The next question, and again, keep them
Mhm.
coming. This is from John Vibach, and he said, for the XYZ formula, would you advise leading with the Y quantification more often in bullets? And then he also mentioned something more bottom line focused for scanning, BLUF.
Ah, so so let's say 2 parts. One, I would say you can switch the order. So if sometimes the thing that you worked on, it's easier to describe YXZ or YZX. Like, so if you think of each of those are kind of phrases that you're just moving around, just make sure it makes sense when someone's reading the bullet. But yes, XYZ is the most typical, but I definitely have seen people rearrange some of those pieces in order to describe something. Um, the blue, like I assume that you're mentioning that in terms of simply making it shorter and more specific, like the TLDR type thing of, so yes, sometimes when you're trying to do accomplishments, you realize your bullet's too long, and that might mean you have to break it into 2, and then you have to decide where am I putting which result or which accomplishment. And so sometimes that's some of the challenge of making it as succinct as you can, is that you're like, well, actually, I achieved 2 very different things. Or there was a second order effect on the accomplishment. Like I did this, as an intern, I developed a presentation, um, and my manager was so happy that I then had to redo it and present it to senior leadership at the company. Like those might be 2 different things because you redid the presentation, or you had to do something different for that second version of it than the first one. So yeah, so I'll stop there.
Right. Perfect. All right, the next question. This is from Wanda Griffin, and she's asking, even though I upload my resume, Workday typically asks to add employment history, including a job description. Should I just copy?
Yes, yes. And I personally find those systems incredibly frustrating because with the tools we have now, it should be able to scrape that. However, because some companies are not there yet with their technology, or just um, I used to tell people just leave it blank, but now I've been like, no, don't leave it blank, because depending on who is reading it, that might be how they're actually consuming the information, is the cut and paste. So I would say fill it in. I know it is frustrating, and I apologize on behalf of all recruiters everywhere. However, cutting and pasting will at least cover your bases.
Gotcha. So this one is another question, just more generic. How do you address gaps in a work history?
Yeah. D Depends on the type of gap. So, for example, if you took time off to either be a caregiver or some other type of leave, uh, I personally I have that on my LinkedIn profile, when I took time off to actually take care of my father. So I sometimes include it on my resume. Not at this point anymore, but I did want to highlight there was a reason that I took a gap. Sometimes that's too personal and you don't want to. Instead, what I would try to use is, what is a skill that you learned, or like take a class or a certification in that time period. So then it looks like there was something happening, and then you get to decide whether or not you want to tell something personal about that, or simply, I was in a transition phase and I really focused on, um, building a skill set. And because I'm switching careers, et cetera, it really made sense for me to focus on that skill building phase. Some people, they also actually, this is why they create like consulting firms and others. And then that's where they are doing projects so they can mitigate that there's a gap on their resume. So a few different kind of tips and tools.
Okay. Some good advice there. Another follow-up question is, what LinkedIn learnings would you suggest? Hopefully I'm getting this right, for resume, alternative version for seasoned professionals, or the seasoned professional? I'm guessing these are different sessions that
Mhm.
are available on LinkedIn Learning.
Um, I would have to go look. I don't have one off the top of my head that I would suggest. I do have a template that I use for exec. So I could share that with the Prospanica team so they can also send that out. And
Okay.
similarly, I also have the resume template for the MBA, the first and second year current MBA students. I have a template for that. So I'll make sure you can share that. And then you can always reach out if you have more questions as well.
Perfect. Yeah. That would be great, because one of the other general questions that had come in is if there are certain templates that we should use. And I think, sort of related to that, if there's specific fonts or formatting styles or designs that are more current. I've
Yeah.
heard about all the serifs and the double spaces, you
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. I touched on some of that at the beginning. So for those who joined a little bit late, totally fine. When you watch the replay, I did give some examples of fonts. So like Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman. They're just readable fonts. Garamond could be another one. Um, the um, the templates the biggest thing I would say with templates is simply you want it to just be clean, and not like there was the old school Microsoft Word templates which had like two columns and it was had lots of lines. It just takes up extra real estate. And when you only have one page, you want it to be as simple as possible for someone to scan it very quickly. I promise recruiters will love you like humans, and the bots will also make it much easier to scan because there's not all this other stuff in the way of them trying to actually read your content, and the words that you have. So,
Perfect. All right. I don't know if I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. So I would say, oh, here's one more question that just right off the bat.
no problem.
So if you have a lot of additional experience or volunteer experience that's relevant, but it could be more than 10 years ago, what's the best way to list it?
Um, So I always think about this experience as relevant versus recent is kind of like a good way. And so if it is recent, you should definitely include. If it is relevant, I think it's also useful to include. Um, the Earlier at the beginning, I kind of listed a bunch of different sections you can have at the bottom of your resume. And so that was projects, skills, awards, leadership, volunteer, and personal. And so any one of those could be a great place to put volunteer experience. So depending on if you were like a chapter leader for Prospanica and you really wanted to highlight that, that could either be in your experience section, or it could be in a volunteer section, or it could even be in a leadership section. So it depends on the frame that you want to use to highlight that particular volunteer experience. I know, like for myself, when I worked at MIT, before that, I had been my Princeton reunions chair, and it was a huge project because I was managing, like 1,500 classmates. Like I was the one who was registering them, all of this. And so I remember interviewing at MIT, and she was like, that was part of why I knew you would do well in this role, because part of what we need is someone who understands how to manage 200 some students in this program we have. And I could see you knew how to manage data. And so that volunteer experience was actually really helpful for me to get a full-time job. And so this is part of why I'm always talking about this informal experience stuff, because it adds either dimension to your background or highlights a skill that you picked up and that you recognize this is a valuable skill. I just picked it up, not in a paid role, but in a volunteer role.
I think that's such a great way to wrap up our session today.
No
Again, I
problem.
really want to thank you, Liz, for all of this great insight. I think this is some great ways to get folks prepared for the conference. I want to thank you for all your thoughtful questions from the audience and the active participation. We had a lot of valuable insights that we can now use to master the resume and get noticed. I think this is going to be a high level of resumes at the national conference this year. So I hope everybody is feeling inspired from the session and ready to register. But remember, the conversation doesn't end here. We talked a little bit about AI today, but our next session is going to really be focused on that. We're going to be leveraging AI to build your executive brand on LinkedIn. That one's going to be happening on Thursday, October 9th. And this webinar will provide you with strategies to navigate LinkedIn effectively and to optimize your presence on the platform. And as well, over the next few weeks, we'll be offering a lineup of pre-conference webinars leading up to the Prospanica virtual conference on October 23rd and 24th. And as a reminder, this is free, so you should register and really take advantage of this. So be sure to save the date and get ready to engage and learn and lead. And again, I really want to thank everybody for your time and to thank you for joining us today. And we will see you soon. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.